Hi there. Welcome to the Healing Migraines Naturally podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Caesar, and I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor, former chronic migraine sufferer, and I help women all over the United States restore their health so that their body stops generating the migraines and they can get off unwanted medication and do it all without taking a fistful of supplements. So welcome to the podcast today. I'm really excited to talk with you about the new food pyramid guidelines. So this is causing quite a stir, definitely within my community, the naturopathic community, the natural medicine, alternative health industry, as well as the public at large. But we're going to talk about how this relates specifically to chronic migraine sufferers, because nobody is talking about this. And unfortunately, someone who has chronic migraines could try to implement these new food pyramid recommendations and actually find that their migraines are getting worse while they're trying to eat healthier. Okay, so I'm really excited to talk with you about this today. So let's just summarize what the changes are first. Okay, so the major changes in the food pyramid guidelines, the recommendations. So number one, eat real food. That's what they say. So what is real food? So real food basically is food that you buy at the grocery store and you take home and you cook it and you eat it. Real food is found in the produce section, the meat counter, the dairy case. Okay, so basically real food is food that it's a carrot, it's a piece of chicken, right? It's food that you're purchasing, you're taking home, you're cooking it, and you're eating it. This is in contrast to what I call factory-made food. A lot of people call this processed food. I think factory-made food is a better descriptor. So this is food that's going to be pre-made for you in a factory, and it might be very recognizable to you as real food. So like I'm a Costco member, so you can go through the refrigerator cases at Costco and you can get factory-made mashed potatoes. You can get factory-made soups, right? So these are foods where they're made in a factory, but they're recognizable as something that you would make at home. And then you have foods that are typically called ultra-processed foods. To me, I still call them factory foods because they're made in a factory, but these are things that are more what we might consider junk food, Doritos, right? I mean, I've never made a Dorito at home, right? So they are foods that you are not in any way ever going to make in your own home, and they're not maybe even recognizable as to what is the food that it's made out of, right? So like Doritos, what are they made out of? There's no Dorito tree, right? If you look at the ingredients, you can read, I'm pretty sure they're made out of like corn flour or something, but it's not, when you look at a Dorito, it's not recognizable what food made this Dorito versus if you're looking at, Amy's organic, cheese enchiladas that you're buying in the freezer case at the grocery store that's made in a factory. But, you have some sense that if I made cheese enchiladas at home, I kind of know what's in here, right? I would kind of know how to make this at home. So the new guidelines specifically recommend that people eat real food, right? And so this would, be food that you are purchasing in its sort of whole form, like carrots, piece of chicken, a steak, right? And you're taking it home and you're cooking it and you're eating it. And they are telling people to de-emphasize certainly the ultra-processed foods, okay, that are really unrecognizable as to what the food is, but even the other factory-made foods like the Costco mashed potatoes that are made for you in a factory, right, even those are being de-emphasized. So that's the first major change to the guidelines. The second major change to the guidelines is a doubling of the protein recommendation. So this is a real game changer here. And so the previous recommendations recommended about 0.6 grams of protein per kilogram. The new recommendations are 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, so nearly a doubling of the protein recommendation. So you're looking somewhere around 75 to 90 grams of protein per day. So this is going to be about double what they were recommending before. I couldn't agree with this more. I'll just stated up front. The previous protein recommendations on the food pyramid were woefully too low. Okay, so the previous protein recommendations were sort of like the amount of protein you need so that you don't die in a famine. Okay, now there's a big difference between staying alive and minimally subsisting and what your body optimally needs. Okay, and so in the current environment that we live in a modern environment that is very, very stressful, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so you're going to need more protein to thrive in that higher stress environment. And so the increase, like nearly doubling the protein recommendation for Americans, I couldn't agree with this more. The other recommendation, the other big change, is recommending that people eat dairy products and whole milk dairy products. Now, I recommend to all of my clients that they consume whole milk dairy products. So when you're consuming whole milk, you are consuming the milk closer to the form in which it comes out of the cow, okay? It's going to be a little bit less processed. Now, the vast majority of Americans are drinking highly processed milk and consuming highly processed dairy products because it's pasteurized and homogenized. We'll talk about some of these issues later in the podcast, but despite that, if you drink a glass of whole milk, you're consuming a form of the milk that's closer to the way sort of nature intended and the way that we have adapted to drink milk, because pasteurization and homogenization is something that is a blink of an eye, development in human history. Humans have been separating the fat from the milk because the fat rises to the top, and so humans have been separating and taking that concentrated fat off the top and making things like butter and so on with it. But what was left was what we call whole milk, and we are very adapted to drinking that whole milk. And so this is another recommendation that I wholeheartedly agree with. The other major change to the recommendations is dramatically decreasing the amount of grains that people are recommended to eat. So in the previous food pyramid, the recommendation for grains was anywhere from 6 to 11 servings of grains. This is insane. Okay, so the new recommendations are recommending about 2 to 3 servings of grains, which for most women, they're going to feel really good having a serving of grains with 2 or 3 meals per day. So these recommendations, the new food pyramid recommendations, if you're familiar with some of the different diets that are out there, you're going to recognize that the new guidelines are based off of what is called the modified Mediterranean diet. So this is a sort of a way of eating, if you will, a diet that is based on what is called the Mediterranean diet, which is sort of the native diet in the Mediterranean region. And the Mediterranean diet, I believe, is very, very well suited to promote health in the current environment that we are living in here in the United States. And so how I teach my clients to eat is my own slight modification of the modified Mediterranean diet. I'm a little less restrictive, actually, than the modified Mediterranean diet. But in general, the modified Mediterranean diet is not a restrictive diet. You are recommended to eat a wide variety of food and a protein intake, which is basically the same as what these new recommendations are, and fats, every cell in your body uses fatty acids. Okay, so again, the new food pyramid recommendations, the modified Mediterranean diet recommendations include that people eat enough fat servings during the day, throughout the day. And then certainly we all know you're supposed to eat vegetables. So certainly with the new food pyramid recommendation, you're supposed to eat your vegetables. I help my clients incorporate more vegetables into their eating habits if that's been a challenge for them. And then a moderate amount of fruit. I couldn't be happier with the new food pyramid recommendations. I agree that if you eat this way, you're going to be eating a wide variety of food that you enjoy. You're not going to be sort of white knuckling your way through food, food restrictions and so on, and you're going to be consuming a wide variety of nutrients, and the increased protein intake is really going to help you thrive in the very stressful environment, inherently stressful environment that we live in this country. So what's the problem, right? Why would this give somebody a migraine? Okay, so this is where you have to go a little bit deeper into how what you eat is sort of interplaying or interacting with the overall state of health that you are in. And nobody is talking about this. So if you have been listening to the podcast for a while, you will note that I talk about what I call the 3 principles. Okay, so there are 3 things that our body needs to maintain its state of health and restore itself back to health if it's fallen out of health. Okay, and if you're getting chronic migraines, your body is not in a state of health, despite what your blood work shows, despite what your doctor tells you. When our body is not in a state of health, it generates symptoms. And migraines are a symptom that the body generates when it's not in a state of health. And so if you're listening to the podcast and you're trying to recover from migraines, you're not in a state of health. This is not a indictment of you. This doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just a statement of fact. When the body is not in a state of health, it generates symptoms. So there are 3 things that our body needs to maintain its health and restore itself back to health. Every living thing on the planet has the ability to heal and recover, okay? And we are no exception to that. So our body wants to get us back into a state of health, but if it can't, it's because there are missing pieces or blockers or deficiencies within what I call the 3 principles. So what are the 3 principles? So principle number 1, we have to get the nutrients that our cells need to our cells. Our cells don't do anything without nutrients, okay? We don't run on Starbucks Frappuccinos and unicorn dust. Everything that is going to get done in our body requires nutrients for the cells to make their enzymes, make their, protein molecules. Everything that the body does requires nutrients to drive those biochemical pathways. So if the cells don't have the nutrients that they need to function optimally, they just don't die, okay? They just don't drop dead, thank goodness, but they do the best they can in less than ideal conditions. So they're not going to be functioning optimally. And so that starts at the cellular level, moves up to the organ level, the organ system level, right? Your entire body. So we have to get the nutrients that our cells need to the cells. And so if we're not feeling well, there's going to be a blocker that's preventing the nutrients from getting to the cells. Principle number 2 is we have to clear metabolic waste material and other toxins from the cells and eliminate them from the body. So when the cells do their work, they generate waste material. A lot of people call these toxins. So we are continuously making toxins, okay? Now there are toxins in the food supply, in the water supply, in the air supply, some of which are man-made, some of which are naturally occurring. Those are going to get into our body too. All of this has to be detoxified and eliminated from the body. We have what we need to do that. Our liver is the main organ doing that work, but we also have our kidneys and our lungs. Those are the 3 organs of detoxification. So if there's a whole bunch of trash laying around inside the cell, okay, the cell is not going to function optimally. If the cell is not functioning optimally, right, we're not going to feel good. Our body is going to adapt to less than ideal conditions, but the price of that are what we call symptoms, okay? If you're a woman having 8 or more migraine days a month, let's talk. I'll show you how to drop them to near 0 in 90 days. And that's without adding more medication. In fact, you can even lower or possibly even completely wean off of your medication within 90 days. And that's without any agonizing cold turkey withdrawals. So let me tell you about one of my clients, Judy. She was nearly bedridden because she was having to take such strong medications for her migraines, and she could barely function. In fact, she had to close the doors of her small retail business, and she was feeling like a failure. She wondered every day, why was she doomed to suffer from migraines? But just like you, she found this Healing Migraines Naturally podcast, and a spark ignited. She knew that if she could just figure out why these migraines started in the first place, she could restore and recover her health again. So she booked her free consult call, and the rest is history. Now she reports months in between migraines and runs her small business full-time again. She followed the 12-week plan and got incredible results, and she's completely weaned off of all of those preventative medications that were leaving her feeling doped up and committing her to being bedridden. I have worked with women just like Judy from all over the United States overcome migraines naturally. So if you're serious about healing your migraines, then tap the link in the description and book a free consult call with me, just like Judy did. We do cap new clients monthly, so if the calendar is full, the doors are closed for now. So don't wait to reclaim the life you deserve to live. No matter how hopeless things seem now, with expert guidance, your body can heal and recover. So I look forward to chatting with you. Click the link now to schedule your call. And then the third principle is restoring our resiliency and vitality. So this corresponds to the literal cellular voltage, intracellular voltage, which they've been able to measure, but it also corresponds to the overall organizing energy of the body that keeps everything coordinated, right? We call this homeostasis in biology. And it's a fascinating concept that we really don't understand that much about. But when you look at life on Earth, there's clearly an organizing energy that keeps the organism sort of running smoothly. We are just a spectacularly complex organism. We have our physical body, which is 30 to 40 trillion cells, okay? Then in addition to our physical body, we have our mental and emotional component, which we've just scratched the surface of understanding that. Throughout the ages, humans who have thought about, okay, how do we function? How are we alive? You can see that there's an organizing energy, an animating force. Some people call this a life force. In traditional Chinese medicine, they call it qi. In naturopathic medicine, we call it the vital force. There's an organizing energy that keeps everything running smoothly in homeostasis. So when I talk about the third principle, we want to increase not only the cellular energy, cellular voltage, which is a measurable phenomenon in the lab, but we also want to increase this life force, the chi, the vital force. We want to strengthen the organizing energy of the body. And when we do that, we can withstand stressors. We call these migraine triggers most of the time, right? So we can withstand the stress of a barometric pressure change. We can withstand the stress of the sun beating down on us as we're outside hiking. We can withstand the stress of a conflict with a coworker, right? When we are suffering from migraines, right, we're trying to bubble wrap ourselves from all of these stressors, physical, mental, emotional stressors. We are trying to bubble wrap ourselves and protect and avoid, and oh my goodness. But that's not the answer, because these stressors are inevitable. And so we want to increase our resiliency and vitality so that we can weather these stressors. And then again, at the cellular level, we have to have enough cellular voltage. You have to have enough energy for things to run inside of the cell. So these are the three things that our body needs to feel good, okay? When we're in a state of health, we feel good, our body isn't generating symptoms. Okay? So again, what happens to people is they start to develop maybe a little deficiency in an area, things start to kind of snowball, and then they start to develop blockers within these three principles. When you have a blocker, you can't just change your habits, okay? You can't, if you have a blocker within these three principles, just changing your eating habits is not going to make a tremendous difference. And most migraine sufferers have already put in a lot of effort changing their eating habits, okay? Most of my clients, when they come to me, they're already eating pretty well. I do have some clients where they say, you know what, Dr. Leslie, I need some help. I know that I'm not eating well, and, please help me. I could do a lot better. But most migraine sufferers, because they are trying to avoid food triggers, are already not eating a bunch of Doritos. They're not eating a bunch of ultra-processed foods. They're eating pretty clean already. When you heard these new food pyramid guidelines, most chronic migraine sufferers are going, yeah, I'm pretty much already doing that, or, on my way there, right? And I'm still getting 15 migraines a month, right? So for migraine sufferers, right, this is where I want to go into what's actually going on here, because I read through the press release information when they put out the new food pyramid guidelines, and they talked about the chronic disease crisis in this country, which is a very real thing. Most Americans are not feeling well. Trust me, okay? With migraine sufferers, what do we always say? I've said it. When I had chronic migraines, we go, my brother-in-law eats terrible, and he never gets even a headache, right? He never has a problem, he just eats whatever. And then I'm like so careful, I can't even eat a strawberry, or I have a little piece of tomato and I'm down for the count, right? How come I have to eat so carefully and nobody else does? I eat so clean. My husband doesn't, he never, right? We are always saying things like this, right? So we are already sort of ahead of the curve with our eating habits, most of us, right? So in the press release information, they're talking about the chronic disease crisis and how diet, obviously, right? What we eat, our body is literally made out of what we've eaten. Okay, what our mother ate, right? And then what we were fed, and then what we have continued to eat, like literally that's what we're made out of, right? So, people know that what they eat has an impact on their health, right? So in the press release information for the food pyramid, it was a lot about the chronic disease crisis, which is a very real thing, and how, the food supply and what people eat are contributing to that, which is definitely a real thing. But if you have a blocker that's preventing the nutrients from getting to your cells, just changing your eating habits is not going to have a big impact. And this is not being talked about. This is not in the press release, okay? So let's dive into this a little bit more. So when we eat food, our digestive tract has to break the food down and sort of extract or liberate the nutrients from the food. I've talked about this on several podcasts. So most Americans have poor digestive function, unfortunately. Most migraine sufferers have poor digestive function, unfortunately. And most Americans don't realize that they have poor digestive function because we've been told that it's normal to have digestive symptoms, right? So the symptoms are so common that Americans don't realize that they're symptoms. They think it's normal, right? So some of the most widely selling over-the-counter and prescription medications are to cover up digestive symptoms, right? So how many Americans have heartburn? How many Americans are taking something like Prilosec, a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor, because they have heartburn? These used to be prescription only. Now they're available over the counter. This class of medication, these PPIs, they're consistently within the top 10 selling drugs in America. So there's a tremendous number of Americans that are suffering from heartburn. But we've been told it's normal. Oh, well, you had tomatoes. What do you expect? Oh, you had a piece of pizza. What do you expect? Oh, you had spicy food. What do you expect? It's so common for people to have heartburn that we think that it's normal to have it. And so when we go into, the drugstore, the Walgreens, and get that over-the-counter Prilosec, or we get the Tums, the Alka-Seltzer, right? We think, oh, this is just something that I need to do because I have this heartburn and it's inevitable and, it's really not that big of a deal. Everybody gets heartburn, right? I mean, I did have a piece of pizza. So this is one of the most common symptoms that is actually a symptom, okay? Then we've got gas, bloating, irregular bowel movements, right? Loose stools, constipation, back and forth. A lot of people walk around all the time just with indigestion, right? It just doesn't feel good in there, right? So another common symptom is people have difficulty swallowing, right? So the food is getting stuck. They're regurgitating food. So these are some of the most common symptoms that people experience. Isn't it normal to look like you're 6 months pregnant by the end of the day? Everybody seems like all my friends, me, right? Everybody. It's not normal to look like you're pregnant at the end of the day. My stomach has really not even a noticeable change from when I get up in the morning to when I go to bed at night. But because these symptoms are so common, people think it's normal. So if you don't have good digestive function and you eat food, your digestive tract is going to struggle to break that food down. And then you're going to have even more digestive symptoms, right? Because if it's already struggling and then it's going to struggle more, you're going to have more heartburn. You're going to have more indigestion. You're going to have more gas. You're going to have more bowel problems, right? So different types of foods are easier to digest than other types of foods. So when our digestive tract is struggling, our appetite changes. This is very, very important for people to understand. So we don't have a conscious control over our appetite. People talk about food cravings, right? Well, I just don't feel like eating that, or I really feel like eating that, right? If our digestive tract is going to struggle to break down certain foods, it's going to change our appetite. It's going to drive us to want to eat foods that are easier to digest. And it's going to make foods that are harder to digest unappealing to us. We're going to fill up faster. All right, so you get a plate, you think, yeah, this seems like a meal, right? You take a couple bites, oh, I'm full. Oh, I can't eat anymore, right? So we're not conscious of this, right? Because to us, what we feel like eating, how much we eat, that just seems like how it's supposed to be, right? It's like if I'm eating food, if I'm eating a plate of food and I start to feel full, it's like, well, I guess I ate enough, right? I guess that was enough for me, right? And so we stop eating. Or if we're being pulled to eat certain foods and other foods don't seem that unappealing, we're going to be drawn to the foods that we want to eat. So the easiest to digest foods are grains, okay? Grains are not especially nutrient dense. Grains are carbohydrates, and carbohydrates, all plants are made out of carbohydrates, not just grains. But carbohydrates are basically long chains of glucose. And grains have a lot of glucose on those carbohydrate chains. They're not that nutrient dense. And it's very easy for the digestive tract to sort of snip off those little glucose molecules off of the chain. That's super easy to do. Protein is harder to digest. Okay, so to break protein down into amino acids requires a lot more work from the digestive tract. So what happens to people when their digestion starts to decline, they feel like eating more and more grains, and they feel like eating less and less protein. So funny enough, the previous food pyramid recommendations were more in line with the typical American's digestive function than the new guidelines. Think about that. So if I have poor digestive function, if I'm struggling to break down my food, I'm going to want to eat 6 to 11 servings of grains per day. Trust me, it's going to be much easier for me to break that down. And I'm not going to want to eat a lot of protein because that's harder to digest. It's harder to break down. So what's happened over the, 50 years that I've been alive, you can see this shift culturally. So now many, many people don't eat a lot of animal foods. And they say, well, I don't like it. I don't like chicken. It seems real dry to me. oh, steak, it's just, I got to chew and chew and chew that steak. I don't really feel like it's unappealing to me. I just want to have protein powders, right? Well, protein powders are sort of like pre-digested for you, right? So now you've got how many Americans, the majority of the protein they're eating is just in a powder. Well, that's a lot easier to digest than a piece of meat. Also, particularly over the past 15 years, we have been told that it's not only unethical and immoral to eat meat, but it's actually bad for your health. Okay, so at first, I started noticing like a lot of documentaries and so on, encouraging people to eat more plant foods, which at first I was like, great, right? People need to eat vegetables, okay? So I was like, this is great advice. But then it started to turn as the years went on into what, I don't know, might be an organized campaign to actually have people decrease the amount of animal foods and therefore the amount of protein that they're eating. And because people's digestive function is poor and their appetite has changed as a result, this also seemed very natural to people, because if I don't feel like eating a lot of meat because I don't have an appetite for it because my digestive function is low, unbeknownst to me, and then I have a Netflix documentary telling me that it's, not only immoral and unethical, but it's also unhealthy to eat meat, then what people have started to think is, oh, the fact that I don't have an appetite for animal foods, the fact that I don't have an appetite for meat, that must be my body guiding me towards a healthier choice. I have had so many clients that thought that that was what was going on, and that's not what's going on, okay? So we humans thrive when we eat animal foods. Now, of course, we want to have the animals raised in a way that they are healthy, right? We don't want them to be tortured at the end of their life. So putting aside how animals are raised for the food supply, humans thrive with animal food. And like I said at the beginning, particularly the modern American environment that we are in requires more protein intake in order for us to thrive. You have to remember, we humans can thrive in a lot of different environments. We can live from the Arctic to the equator, and there's different food that's available in those areas, right? So we are highly adaptable. We can thrive in a lot of different environments, but if you're at the Arctic, you're not going to thrive eating the food that's native to the equator, right? If you're living in the equator, at the equator, you're not going to thrive on the food that's available in the Arctic. The food has to match the environment that the human is living in. And in our modern American environment, we need more protein. But again, unfortunately, the modern American can't digest the protein. They don't have an appetite for the protein, and they're not getting enough protein in. So, like I say, ironically enough, the previous food pyramid guidelines were more suited to people's digestive function, even though it's a mismatch for the environment. Okay, so when you have that, right, you're going to have the health decline, and that's what we've seen. So this is what I call a blocker. Your digestive function is the blocker to getting the nutrients to the cells, right? So when I talk about the first principle and I say, okay, the first principle, first thing your body needs is the cells have to have the nutrients that they need to function. And people go, oh, she's talking about a diet. She's talking about a migraine diet. I'm not talking about a diet, right? I'm talking about all of the pieces that have to be in place in order to get that end result. And it's not just like, what are you eating, right? A major piece of this is your digestive function. The other main piece of this is actually the function, the proper functioning of your blood, which I won't go into a lot of detail on this podcast. But, there's three major pieces to getting the nutrients to the cells. One is the food that you're eating. Two is your digestive function. And third is the function of your blood to actually get to distribute the nutrients to the cells, right? So when I talk about the first principle and people just sort of hear this word nutrients and they think I'm talking about taking supplements or I'm talking about some sort of special diet. It's more involved than that, okay? So if I eat food that my digestive tract can't break down, I'm not going to feel good. So you have millions of Americans who have poor digestive function, protein is harder to break down, and then if they're following these recommendations, they're going to try to increase their protein intake. If you don't have migraines, right, if you're not prone to migraines, and you overload your digestive tract with food that it can't break down very well, you're not going to feel great, okay? Oh, man, I tried to eat that chicken, and, I was belching all night, I had gas, right? You're probably going to have an uptick in digestive symptoms as your digestive tract is struggling to break down that food, okay? But if you're prone to migraines, and you put food into your digestive tract that you can't break down, this is a great way to get a migraine, okay? And I've talked about this on some other podcasts. We'll link to those in the description, okay? But basically, if you can't break the food down properly, you're going to have an influx of toxins coming in to your bloodstream from your digestive tract, okay? Again, I go into this in more detail in other podcasts, so I'm just going to keep it high level for this one. So when you have an influx of toxin molecules from your digestive tract, this is a fantastic way to get a migraine, okay? Because migraines themselves are a toxicity symptom. They're a symptom that your body has an overload of metabolic waste material and toxins that your liver and your other organs of detoxification are struggling to detoxify and eliminate from the body, period, okay? So for most migraine sufferers, they have poor digestion, they're struggling to break their food down, and they're already overloaded with toxins. So any little additional influx coming from the digestive tract is going to tip them into a migraine. So I agree with the recommendations, right? But how do we get there? This is the question. So a lot of people, again, they've been to, a functional medicine doctor, they've been to a chiropractor, they've been to another naturopathic doctor, and what they were given was a food list, right? And most functional medicine doctors, chiropractors, naturopaths, they're going to tell their patients to eat pretty much what this new food pyramid recommends, okay? Because this modified Mediterranean diet is well established as being the most health supporting diet for this current environment that we're living in America. So most practitioners are going to recommend something very highly aligned to these new recommendations. So you're going to get a food list and you're going to be told, eat the food on this list and avoid the food on this list. And so the migraine sufferer very diligently tries to do that, and then what do you know? They get a migraine for 3 days, okay? So we have to very carefully improve the digestive function and then make slow changes to eating habits. If you've been eating 8 servings of grains per day, just abruptly cutting that down to 2 or 3 and then adding in a bunch of hard to digest protein, if you're a migraine sufferer, you're highly likely to get a migraine. So as I work with my clients, I'm assessing, okay, what is the digestive function that we're starting with? And then what are we currently eating? And how do we slowly improve the digestive function and then start making gentle changes? Again, if you try to overstimulate the digestive tract in an effort to get it working better, if you're not prone to migraines, again, you may not feel great, right? It might be an uncomfortable couple days, but if you're prone to migraines, right, we're so sensitive when we're in that chronic migraine state that any little stressor tips us into a migraine. So if I'm pushing somebody's digestive tract too hard, that's a physical stressor on the body. And so if I'm prone to migraines and I'm just hovering around my migraine zone and a practitioner comes in and slams my digestive tract, that additional physical stress on my body can tip me into a migraine. So again, I'm not like most practitioners. I'm a former chronic migraine sufferer. This is my life's work. This is why I became a naturopathic doctor. So I know that we have to very carefully make small incremental changes that are going to move you towards health and not tip you into a migraine. Okay, so that's what is not being talked about with the food pyramid. Okay, so you can make somebody feel worse by telling them to eat healthier. Okay, this is a very real phenomenon, and people that are prone to migraines have probably experienced this multiple times, and they're a little bit leery. The other thing that I want to talk about, particularly relative to migraine sufferers about these recommendations, is the recommendation to eat real food. Okay, and so again, like I talked about, this requires someone to go into the grocery store and buy the food and take it home and cook it and eat it. Okay, so this requires a lot of effort. So a lot of people who are struggling with chronic migraines, they are very fatigued, right? Their energy, even on a good day, isn't real high. And then because migraines can hit us at any time, right? We can wake up feeling great, and by 4 p.m. we can be laying on the bathroom floor vomiting, right? So migraines, is the insidious aspect of migraines is that they can take us down very rapidly and, totally ruin the whole day, right? Whatever we have planned. So to eat real food, you have to have enough energy to do the shopping, the meal planning, the shopping, the chopping the vegetables, sauteing everything, doing the dishes afterwards, right? It's a lot of effort to eat real food. So then you go to all of this trouble to do the meal planning, purchasing the food, you've got it in your refrigerator. It's real food. It's going to rot in a couple days, right? It's not like factory-made food that you can keep in the freezer or the refrigerator for a couple months and it's just fine. You got to eat the food because it's fresh food. So you have all of these good intentions to eat the food that you've made the effort to buy that's in your refrigerator, but what do you know? Now you're struck down with a migraine, and what you were planning on making that night, there's no way you're going to be able to make that. You can hardly, keep your eyes open, and you can hardly move from a horizontal position out of the bed. So you're not going to be downstairs, cooking some beef, and then, the odor from the beef makes you want to vomit. I mean, it's a whole nightmare, right? So for chronic migraine sufferers, they've been through this cycle so many times. They know that their eating habits impact their health. Again, I don't think I'm saying anything shocking. I think everybody realizes, right, that you have to have health supporting eating habits. You're supposed to eat real food that you buy at the grocery store and you take home and you cook and eat. Again, I don't think this is that revolutionary for people, but for migraine sufferers, right, you go through the effort to do this. You've got the whole thing planned out, and then you're struck down with a migraine. And then the food rots in your fridge because you're down for the count for a couple days, right? You've got, you're in bed for a day, and then the next day you're like, oh my goodness, I feel like I got hit by a truck and I don't really feel like doing too much, right? So now the food has rotted and now you've got to throw the food out, right? So you've wasted your time, you've wasted your money, you've wasted the resources that went into, making the food, right? It's a whole guilt trip. So again, just saying, well, eat real food for chronic migraine sufferers, this can be a real challenge. So again, with my clients, I understand this. I've been there too personally. So I've worked with clients where they can't go to the grocery store. They're too light sensitive, right? I mean, they're wearing sunglasses in their house that you think they're going to go into a Costco and buy a bunch of stuff, right? They can't be in a grocery store for more than a couple minutes, right? And, now after COVID, there's a lot of pickup options or delivery options, but, that may not be available or convenient or cost effective for you, right? So even doing the food shopping itself for a migraine sufferer can be, very, very difficult. So again, most practitioners, they're just kind of giving you a food list and saying, well, go to the store and buy this food. And then when you can't do that, you're the problem. That's not how I look at this. So again, I'm looking at, okay, we do have to eat. Okay, that's a requirement. We've got to eat. So what is doable for you given the frequency and severity of your migraines and the other, sensitivities or barriers that you may have? And then also, who else is in your house, right? Is it just you? Or, do you have a husband and 3 kids that also have to be accommodated with their meals, right? What I have done many times is help my client navigate. I've had clients where, the only food I can get is through a drive-through. That's the only thing I can muster. I don't have energy for anything else. And I have guided clients through, okay, what do you order at the drive-through, right? What are the drive-through restaurants that you have access to? And then what would be the best thing for you to order on that menu, given your current digestive function, given what your body's currently used to eating, and how can we move the needle a little bit so that you don't feel worse, but we can get a little bit more nutrients in while we're working on improving your digestive function, and then of course overall reducing the severity and frequency of your migraines and improving your energy level. And as people's energy improves, as their migraines start to improve, okay, can we move on to a factory-made food that you get in the grocery store? Maybe it's Amy's organic something or other in the freezer section. Yeah, I could do that now. I think I could do that. Okay, great. What are we going to do, right? And we build up from there, because you can't eat real food unless you can make all of those other things happen. And a lot of people can't make that happen. I get it. So we've got to work with what we can accomplish. A recommendation is worthless if you can't implement the recommendation. And so this is, sometimes the level of problem solving and individualized recommendations that we have to go through to get people turned around. Okay, so this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about relative to chronic migraine sufferers. Eating real food, you may or may not be able to implement that right now. And if you can't, that's okay. We have to work with what we have, but we can make incremental changes no matter where we're starting from. So thanks a lot for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. Like I say, in general, I'm very pleased with the new recommendations. It's a long time coming, but my concern is how people implement the recommendations. I think, unfortunately, a lot of Americans are going to struggle to make those changes because their digestive function is not going to sort of allow them to make those changes. And for migraine sufferers, that can lead to a migraine itself. So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope this helps. Like I say, I think this is really critical information that people are not talking about and not considering. If you resonate with this, if you've had a few aha moments regarding your appetite and your digestive function, and maybe why you've struggled to implement, so-called healthier eating habits in the past, let me know. And if you'd like to work with me, please book a free consult call with me, and I will ask you a few questions about your migraines and any other health concerns that you have. And if I can help you, I will tell you that. But if I don't think you're a good candidate for what I do, I will also tell you that too, and try to find someone that would be a better fit for you. So again, happy to talk with you on a free consult call if this resonates with you and you're ready to turn around these chronic migraines. Talk to you guys soon.